The rain had been falling since late afternoon, but by the time evening came, it turned into a heavy downpour that soaked the city from one corner to another. The sound of it echoed through the empty parking lot outside the tall government building, hitting the pavement like thousands of tiny drums. Most people had already rushed home hours ago, eager to escape the cold wind that came with the storm. But inside the building, a single dad named Ethan was finishing the last minutes of his shift. He pushed his cleaning cart down the final hallway, humming softly to keep himself awake. His clothes were clean but worn, the kind that had seen many late nights and long shifts. His hands were rough from years of work, but he still moved with a quiet kind of patience. He kept glancing at the clock on the wall, not because he hated working, but because he knew his daughter would be waiting for him. She always tried to stay awake until he came home. When the clock finally struck the end of his shift, Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, put away the cleaning supplies, and grabbed the old umbrella he kept near the exit. He checked it quickly, hoping it would survive one more storm. Then he stepped outside. The rain hit him instantly, cold and sharp. His umbrella rattled in the strong wind, and for a second he thought it would flip inside out. He held it tightly, lowering his head as he walked toward the bus stop. The parking lot lights flickered in the darkness, making the wet ground shine like a mirror. That was when he saw someone at the far end of the lot. At first, he thought it was a person simply gathering their things before leaving. But the longer he looked, the clearer the situation became. A car sat still under the yellow glow of a lamp, and a woman stood beside it, drenched from head to toe. The rain fell on her papers, her bag, and her hair, yet she kept trying to work on something near the tire. Ethan hesitated for a moment. She looked like she was probably in a hurry, and he didn't want to disturb her. But she seemed troubled, and her clothes suggested she wasn't just an office worker. Something about her stance and the badges on her jacket made him guess she held an important position. Another strong wave of rain poured down, and Ethan made his decision. He changed direction and walked toward her. "Hey," he said gently, trying not to startle her. "Do you need help?" She looked up, her eyes tired but alert. Even with rain sliding down her face, she maintained a calm expression. "My tire's flat," she replied, raising her voice to be heard over the storm. "And my tools are in the trunk, but it's hard to see anything in this weather." Ethan nodded. "I can help if you'd like." The woman hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should accept help from a stranger. But then she noticed his uniform shirt, the simple one worn by janitors in the building. Her shoulders relaxed a little. "I'd appreciate it," she said. "Thank you." Ethan knelt down beside the tire, shielding the area with his umbrella as best he could. But it only covered her, not him. Within minutes, his back and shoulders were soaked. The rainwater ran down his arms and dripped from his hair. Still, he didn't complain. He worked with steady hands, loosening bolts, lifting the car slightly, and replacing the tire. The woman watched him quietly at first, then spoke. "You didn't have to come over. It's freezing out here." "It's all right," he said, tightening the last bolt. "You shouldn't be out here alone in this weather." She lowered her eyes for a moment, touched by his kindness. In her world, people rarely helped without expecting something in return. But this man didn't even know who she was. When the tire was finally fixed, Ethan stepped back and wiped his wet hands on his shirt. His umbrella was practically useless now, hanging limply at his side. "There," he said with a small smile. "You should be good to go." The woman let out a breath she had been holding. "Thank you, really, no problem." She reached into her bag, pulling out a dry handkerchief to wipe her documents. The rain had soaked through everything she carried. She quickly checked each folder and each sheet, trying to make sure nothing critical was ruined. Ethan noticed how important those papers seemed. "Are you carrying something important?" She looked up again, the corners of her lips lifting slightly. Yes, very important. He didn't pry further. Before he turned to leave, she said, "You work inside the building, right?" "Yes," Ethan replied. Night shift. Her eyes softened with a mix of respect and curiosity. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "Thank you, Ethan. I mean it." He nodded and gave a small wave. "Take care." The roads must be slippery. As he walked away, she watched him disappear into the rain. She had been helped by many people in her career, but this moment felt different, simple, sincere, and unexpected. A few minutes later, as Ethan reached the bus stop, he heard the distant sound of her car starting. He didn't know her name, didn't know her rank, didn't know the weight she carried on her shoulders. She was just someone who needed help. Meanwhile, inside her car, she sat still for a moment before driving off. Her clothes were wet, her papers were a mess, but she felt a strange sense of relief. She kept thinking about the soaked janitor who stayed in the storm just to help her Dot as she drove away. She didn't notice a single waterproof folder slipping out of her bag and falling onto the wet ground under her car. The rain continued to pour, washing the city clean and hiding small things that would matter soon. Ethan boarded the bus, unaware that the simple act of kindness he had shown that night would soon shape his entire future. At that moment, he was thinking only about getting home to his daughter, about warming up, and about making sure she had something good to eat. But destiny had started moving quietly, like the rain that kept falling without caring who noticed. He didn't know it yet. But that night wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The morning sun struggled to break through the gray clouds left behind by the storm. The streets were still wet, and puddles covered almost every corner of the sidewalk. Ethan stepped off the bus, tired but trying to stay awake. His clothes were still a bit damp from the night before, and his umbrella, now nearly broken, hung from his bag. He walked toward his small apartment building, rubbing his hands together to get some warmth. As he unlocks the door, he enters as quietly as possible. The apartment is simple, with 2 small rooms, a tiny kitchen, and walls that carry the memories of many long nights. On the sofa near the window, his daughter Lily is curled up in a blanket. Her small backpack is beside her, and a half-finished drawing rests on the table. She must have tried to wait for him. Again, Ethan sets down his bag and kneels beside her. "Hey," he whispers, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "I'm home." Lily stirs a little, slowly opening her eyes. "You're late," she says softly. "I know," he replies with a small smile. The rain slowed everything down. She sits up and yawns, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Did you eat anything?" "Not yet." "I'll warm something." "Go back to sleep for a bit." But Lily shakes her head. "No, I want to talk." Ethan chuckles gently. Even when she was tired, she always wanted to talk. She was his reason for everything, the source of his strength, and the reason he pushed through the hardest days. He carries her to the couch and sits beside her. She looks at him with curious eyes, the way children often do when they sense something happened. "You look more tired than yesterday," she says. He laughs again, though his shoulders ache. "I helped someone last night." "Who?" "Just someone who needed a hand. It was raining, and her car had a problem. I couldn't leave her there." Lily nods slowly, as if she understands everything. "You always help people." Ethan doesn't answer, but a small warmth spreads in his chest. He doesn't think of himself as someone special. He only does what feels right. After making breakfast and packing Lily's school lunch, he walks her to the bus stop. She waves at him through the window as the school bus drives away. Ethan stays for a moment, watching until she disappears from view. Then he starts walking back, feeling the heaviness of his shift catching up to him. Meanwhile, across the city, the woman he helped the night before, Admiral Lawson, sits in her office with a troubled expression. Her desk is covered with paperwork, files, and notes. She looks through her bag for the 5th time. Frustration building. The folder is still missing. She presses her hand against her forehead and exhales deeply. The document she lost wasn't just an ordinary file. It contained important details she needed for a strategic meeting that very morning. Losing it could create a mess, and she hated carelessness, especially her own. But in the back of her mind, she keeps remembering the janitor who stood in the cold rain just to help her. His face, soaked and tired, keeps coming back to her. She picks up her phone and calls her assistant. "If anyone finds a waterproof folder near the south parking lot, bring it to me immediately." "Yes, ma'am," her assistant replies. Admiral Lawson hangs up and stares at the rain-soaked window. Something feels unusual. She rarely forgets things. She rarely loses anything. And yet something about last night distracted her more than she expected. Back in Ethan's neighborhood, he stops by a small bakery, buying a cheap cup of coffee to keep himself awake. He rarely buys anything extra, but today felt like he needed the warmth. As he steps out of the bakery, he notices something near the corner of the building. A small waterproof folder, black, official-looking, and sealed tightly. He bends down and picks it up. There is no name on the outside, only a Navy emblem. For a moment, he wonders if it belongs to someone living nearby. But something in his memory sparks. The woman from last night. The important-looking papers she was holding. The stress on her face. He opens the folder carefully, only enough to see what's inside. Lines of text, stamped headers, and security markings make it clear that this isn't something he should keep with him for long. He closes it quickly and holds it to his chest. He knows it belongs to her. He thinks about leaving it at the front desk of the building where he works. But something tells him that isn't enough. What if someone else takes it? What if it doesn't reach her? He isn't sure what the right thing is, but he knows what feels right. He needs to return it to her personally. The thought makes him nervous. He doesn't know her name. He doesn't know her rank. All he knows is that she must be someone important. But Ethan has always followed his conscience, even when things felt complicated. He heads back home long enough to change into dry clothes. He puts on his cleanest shirt and grabs his bus pass. The folder stays in his hands the whole time, never leaving his sight. The building where he works feels different in daylight. People move quickly through the halls, dressed in sharp uniforms and carrying important documents. Ethan stands in the lobby for a moment, unsure what to do. Finally, he approaches the front security desk. "Excuse me," he says quietly. "I need to return this to someone who works here. She was here last night. I helped her with her car." The guard looks at him, then at the folder. His eyebrows rise slightly. "Let me see." The guard says. Ethan holds the folder tighter. "I think it's important she gets it herself." There is a long pause. Then the guard nods. "Wait here." He makes a phone call. A few minutes pass. Ethan's heart beats faster with each second. Finally, Admiral Lawson appears at the top of the stairs. She walks with confidence, dressed in her uniform, her expression calm but curious. As she reaches the bottom, her eyes meet his. "You found it," she says softly. Ethan hands the folder to her. "It was near my building. Must have fallen when you drove off." She takes it with both hands, relief sweeping across her face. "This document is part of a briefing I have in 1 hour. You don't know how much trouble you just saved me from. I'm glad I could get it back to you," he says. She studies him for a moment, noticing the fresh clothes, the tired eyes, the nervous posture. Most people in his position would have turned it in without thinking twice. But he took the time to bring it to her himself. "Would you mind telling me your name again?" She asks, "Ethan?" She nods. "Thank you, Ethan. Not everyone would have returned this." He shrugs lightly. "It was the right thing to do." Her eyes soften. "You helped me in the rain. You returned something important without hesitation. I won't forget that." Ethan feels his cheeks warm, unsure how to respond. He simply gives a small nod. Admiral Lawson turns to leave but stops halfway, glancing back. "If you ever need anything, ask for me." He doesn't know what that means, or if he will ever need help from someone like her. But her words stay with him. As she walks away, Ethan stands quietly in the lobby, unsure why his chest feels tight. Maybe it's the relief of doing the right thing. Maybe it's the strange feeling that this moment is more important than he realizes. He heads back home, thinking only about getting some rest before his next shift. But deep down, something tells him that his life has started to shift slowly, quietly, like a door opening just a bit. He doesn't know it yet. But the simple act of finding that folder is about to change everything. For him, for Lily, and even for the woman whose life circles far above his own. This was not an ending. It was the start of something he never expected. The next few days passed quietly for Ethan, though something about the encounter kept replaying in his mind. He never expected to see the woman from that rainy night again, yet returning the folder had brought them face to face once more. There was something about the way she spoke to him, calm, respectful, almost grateful, that stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. People in high places didn't usually notice people like him, much less thank them. Still, he pushed the thoughts aside as life returned to its usual rhythm. He went to work, cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, wiped desks, and did every task with the steady patience he had built over the years. He helped coworkers when he could and tried to keep a light tone even when he was exhausted. His world was simple, predictable, and in some strange way, he found comfort in that. His daughter Lily brought her usual joy to the days. Every morning, she asked him what happened at work, and every night, she waited at the window for him until she couldn't keep her eyes open. He tried his best to keep his problems away from her small shoulders, but she was smart. Children always notice what adults try to hide. One evening, as he was preparing dinner, Lily asked, "Dad, are you thinking about something? You look different." He paused for a moment before answering. "Just thinking about work. Nothing serious. You sure?" she asked. "Yeah," he said with a smile, ruffling her hair. "Everything's okay." But deep inside, he knew something had changed. He didn't know what it was or what it meant, but he could feel it. Across the city, Admiral Lawson was dealing with a busy schedule. Meetings, briefings, reports, every hour of her day was tightly planned. But every now and then, her mind drifted back to that rainy night. She hadn't forgotten Ethan, the janitor who helped her without expecting anything. She also hadn't forgotten how he returned the folder personally. That simple act of honesty had stuck with her. In her office, she sat reviewing a stack of documents when her assistant walked in. "Mom, the report is ready for signature," her assistant said. "Thank you," she replied, signing her name with a sigh. The assistant hesitated before speaking again. "Ma'am, you seem a bit distracted." Admiral Lawson looked up. "Do I?" "Yes, ma'am." "Is everything all right?" She paused for a long moment. "I keep thinking about the man who returned the folder. I want his information." Her assistant blinked, confused. "Why do you need his information?" "Because not everyone shows that kind of integrity," she said. "I want to know more about him." The assistant nodded. "I'll check the building roster." She didn't ask more. She didn't make assumptions. She simply wanted to understand the man behind the simple act of kindness. A few days later, Ethan's shift was ending when he received a call from the security desk. He rarely got calls there, and his first reaction was worry. "Ethan, someone asked about your schedule. Nothing urgent, just making sure you are on shift today, the guard told him. Who? Ethan asked, but the guard shrugged. Didn't say a name, but they had authority. Ethan felt his heart stir with confusion. Why would anyone important care about his schedule? He brushed it off, telling himself it must be a mistake, but that small spark of confusion followed him home. Lily noticed it immediately. Dad, are you thinking again? She asked over dinner. Ethan laughed. Maybe a little, but I'm fine, I promise. Lily leaned forward. If something happens, you'll tell me, right? Always, he said. That night, after Lily went to bed, Ethan sat by the window, watching the streetlights glow on the wet pavement. The quiet of the night made him think deeper than he wanted. Why would someone ask about him? Was he in trouble? Did he do something wrong when he returned the folder? Did touching it cause some kind of issue? His thoughts grew heavier with every minute. But sleep eventually pulled him in. The next morning, just as he walked into the building for his shift, he saw something unexpected. Admiral Lawson was standing near the security desk, speaking with the guard. Her uniform looked sharp, perfectly pressed, and she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had lived a life of discipline. His steps slowed. Why was she here? Before he could turn around or pretend he hadn't seen her, a guard caught his eye and motioned him forward. Ethan, the guard said. She was looking for you. Admiral Lawson turned, her expression polite but purposeful. Good morning, she said. Ethan nodded nervously. Good morning. I hope I'm not interrupting your shift, she said. No, ma'am, he replied quietly. She studied him for a moment. I wanted to speak with you. May we talk outside for a moment? Ethan swallowed hard. Yes, of course. They stepped just outside the building entrance, where a cool breeze ruffled the trees. Ethan stood a few steps away, unsure of what she wanted. I had some time this morning, she began, and I wanted to thank you properly. What you did was more than just returning a folder. It showed honesty, responsibility, and character. Ethan looked down. I only did what felt right. Most people wouldn't have gone out of their way, she said. And you didn't even know who I was. He shrugged lightly. It wouldn't have changed anything. Her eyes softened, as if she finally understood something important about him. I reviewed your file, she said. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. My file? Yes, she said calmly. Your work record, your responsibilities, the hours you work, and your situation as a single father. Ethan's breath caught. Ma'am, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. You didn't cause trouble, she assured him gently. I wanted to understand the man behind the actions. And what I found was someone who works harder than most people I know. He didn't know what to say. His world was small, simple, and he never expected someone of her rank to look into his life. She continued, Ethan, people often talk about strength as something loud or forceful. But sometimes strength looks like what you do showing up every day, working long hours, raising a daughter alone, and still choosing kindness. Her words hit him deeper than she realized. Ethan blinked, trying to hide the emotion rising in his eyes. I'm not saying any of this to embarrass you, she added. I'm saying it because I want to help you. He lifted his head slightly, confused. Help me? Yes, she said simply. I believe someone like you deserves better opportunities. Ethan took a small step back. Ma'am, I don't understand. I'm just a janitor. She shook her head. You're not just anything. Her tone was firm but warm, like someone issuing an order wrapped in kindness. I have a recommendation to make, she said. But before I do, I want to know something. He nodded slowly. Do you want the better life for yourself and your daughter? The question struck straight into his heart. He didn't answer right away. The truth was simple. Yes, more than anything. But he never believed he had the chance. He never imagined someone like her would ask him that question. Finally, he whispered, "Yes?" She nodded as if she expected that answer. "Good, because I think you've earned one." Before he could ask what she meant, she glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting," she said, "but you'll be hearing from me soon." She walked away with firm steps, leaving Ethan standing outside the building with a swirl of confusion, hope, and fear mixing in his chest. He had no idea what she had planned, but something told him his quiet, predictable life was about to change in ways he never imagined. He just didn't know how big the change would be. Not yet. The next morning arrived quietly, with the soft light slipping through the broken blinds in the small living room. The house felt different, almost too calm, as if everyone inside was trying to process what had happened the night before. There had been surprises, questions, and a wave of emotions that none of them expected. He woke up early, as he always did, because old habits did not fade easily. Years of working long shifts had trained him to rise before dawn, even when he didn't have work to go to anymore. He stretched his back, feeling the familiar stiffness that came from years of lifting heavy mops, buckets, and equipment. But this morning, the ache wasn't what sat on his mind. It was the letter she had brought, the one that could change everything. He walked to the small kitchen quietly, so he wouldn't wake the kids. The kettle clicked as he filled it with water and placed it on the stove. He leaned against the counter and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle. He thought about her, about how she had shown up, soaked in rain, with a paper in her hand and confusion on her face. He had not expected anyone, especially someone like her, to come looking for him. People in high positions didn't usually knock on his door. They didn't search for janitors who worked quietly in the background. And they certainly didn't bring life-changing news. The kettle began to whistle, pulling him back to the present. He poured the water into a cup and wrapped his hands around it, letting the warmth slowly ease him awake. He didn't know what that day would bring, but he knew one thing. He would have to tell the kids. When he turned around, he saw the older one standing in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Dad, you're awake early," the child said softly. He smiled, trying to keep things light. Couldn't sleep. The child walked closer, sensing something was off. "Is it about the lady who came yesterday?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I need to tell you something important, but I want both of you to hear it." The younger one woke up a little later, still half wrapped in a blanket. They all sat together at the small table, where they had eaten countless meals, simple meals, but shared with love. He placed the letter on the table gently, as if it might break. The older one stared at it first, then looked at him. "Is that what she brought?" "Yes," he said. "And it looks like someone left something behind for us, for all of us." The kids exchanged a look of confusion. They didn't understand. He couldn't blame them. It didn't fully make sense to him either. He unfolded the letter, smoothing the creases with his hands. His voice stayed calm, but carried the weight of the truth. "This letter says that someone I once helped, someone who never forgot what I did, left something to us in their will. Not just money, property too, a whole place." The kids stared at him as if he had spoken another language. "What do you mean? Like a house?" The younger one asked. "More than a house," he answered quietly. "A big piece of land. A place she wanted us to have." The older one leaned forward. "Why us?" He swallowed. "Because I helped when I didn't have to. Because sometimes kindness circles back in ways you don't expect." They fell silent. The kids looked down at the table, then back at him. They had lived most of their lives watching him struggle, fight through long shifts, and still try to give them the best he could, hearing that something big might change. It didn't feel real. After breakfast, he stepped outside for fresh air. The wind was cool, carrying the smell of damp earth. The neighborhood was waking up, doors opening, cars starting, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. He stood still for a moment, letting the world move around him. Then he saw her walking towards the house again. She wore a calm expression this time, though her eyes still carried the same mix of responsibility and uncertainty. She lifted a small folder as she approached. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, stepping aside to let her into the yard. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk today," she said. "I know yesterday was a lot." He let out a slow breath. "It was, but I'm ready to hear what comes next." She nodded, opening the folder and pulling out a map and a few documents. "This place she left you," she began, laying the papers out on the small outdoor table, "is on the outskirts of town. It's about 15 acres. A small house sits in the middle of the land. Nothing fancy, but it's sturdy. And it's yours if you want it." He blinked a few times, trying to process the information. 15 acres? Are you sure this isn't some kind of mistake? "No mistake," she said gently. She was very clear. She wanted it to go to the man who helped her when she was at her lowest. He felt his chest tighten. He didn't like to think of people being at their lowest. He had seen enough pain in the world to know that small acts sometimes meant more than people realized. He pulled out a chair and slowly sat down. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now." "But there's something else," she added, sliding him another paper. He looked down. It was a key taped to a note. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. "What's this?" he asked. "That," she said, "is the key to the house on the land. You can go there any time. See it for yourself. No pressure." He held the key tightly, feeling its weight. It wasn't just metal. It was possibility. The kids peeked out from the doorway, watching silently. They didn't want to interrupt, but their curiosity had pulled them closer. She noticed and offered a warm smile. "Good morning, you two." They shyly waved. He looked at his children, then at the key, then at her. Can we see it today?" Her smile widened. "Of course, I can take you there." The kids' faces lit up with excitement they hadn't shown in a long time. For them, new places meant new hope, a fresh start, a break from the tiny home that had kept them safe, but had also held them back. He grabbed their jackets, made sure the door was locked, and followed her to her car. It felt strange sitting in the back seat of a vehicle driven by someone with such a high position. But she made them feel comfortable, talking to the kids, making them laugh, letting them forget for a moment how hard life had been. The drive took nearly an hour. At first, the road stretched through familiar town streets, but soon it opened into wide fields and quiet forests. His children pressed their faces to the windows, pointing at animals and old barns. "This place feels different," the younger one whispered. "Yeah," the older one replied. "Feels like space to breathe." Then the car slowed. "Here we are," she said. They stepped out onto a gravel path. The house was small but beautiful, in the way simple things were beautiful. It stood beneath tall trees, with open fields spreading across the land like a quiet promise. The wind brushed gently over them as if welcoming them. He walked slowly toward the house, each step feeling unreal. His children followed close behind, their eyes wide with wonder. He reached the front door and paused. This wasn't just a building. It was a new beginning. He slipped the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened with a soft creak. Light poured inside. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt hope rise in his chest, steady and warm. Behind him, the kids gasped with excitement, and she stood quietly, giving them space to take in the moment. He stepped inside, and everything changed. The moment he stepped inside the house, everything felt quiet in a way he wasn't used to. It wasn't the silence of their small home, where the walls were thin and the outside noise filled the rooms. This was a peaceful silence, the kind that made you breathe slower without even realizing it. He stood still for a few seconds, taking in the warm wooden floors, the simple furniture left behind, and the sunlight spilling across the room. His children hurried past him, exploring every corner with a mix of excitement and relief. They opened cabinets, tested the faucet, peeked into rooms, and whispered to each other, as if they were afraid the place might disappear if they spoke too loudly. He watched them, a quiet smile forming without him trying. Seeing them happy, even for a moment, made everything feel worth it. She stayed near the doorway, giving them space, but watching everything with gentle eyes. It was clear she wasn't there for formal reasons anymore. Something about the situation had softened the boundary between her world and theirs. He finally turned back to her. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "I thought you'd like it," she replied softly. She kept it simple, but she took care of it. She wanted it to feel lived in. He nodded slowly. "It does." They stepped outside again after a while, wanting to see the land before the sun went down completely. The sky had turned a warm orange, spreading across the open fields like a soft blanket. His children ran ahead, chasing each other, leaving footprints in the tall grass. And the woman walked behind them at an easy pace. "She really cared about this place," he said. "You can feel it." "She did," she agreed. "And she cared about what you did for her. That's why she chose you." He didn't reply for a moment, not because he didn't have something to say, but because the memory of that rainy night came back to him. He had simply helped someone who needed it. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know she was important. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he couldn't walk away from someone standing alone in the rain. "I didn't think she'd remember me," he finally said. "She never forgot," the woman said. "Some moments stay with people forever." They watched the kids play for a while. The sound of their laughter drifted across the land, blending with the soft rush of wind. When the sun dipped lower, he called the children back. They walked toward the house together, and the woman stood by her car, preparing to leave. "I'll give you time to think," she said. "You don't have to decide today if you want to move here permanently. But whatever you choose, I'll help with the paperwork." He looked at the house, then at his kids, then at her. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "Just take the chance she wanted you to have." She left, driving slowly down the gravel path until her car disappeared behind the trees. The three of them stood outside for a long moment. The air felt fresh. The sky had turned deep purple. The house behind them glowed softly through the windows. "Dad," the older one said, "can we stay here?" "Not forever." "Just tonight?" He smiled. "I think that's a good idea." They found old blankets in the closet and made a small place to sleep in the living room. The kids curled up side by side, whispering to each other until their voices faded and sleep tugged them in. He sat alone for a while, listening to the quiet, feeling the weight of the day settle gently instead of heavily. He didn't sleep much. It wasn't the house. He actually felt more at peace here than he had in years. But the future sat in his mind, waiting for him to look at it clearly. In the morning, he walked outside before the kids woke up. Mist floated over the fields. Birds called from the trees. The world felt untouched. He stood there for several minutes, thinking about the life they had lived, the struggles, the cramped spaces, the nights he worried about bills and food and safety. Then he thought about this place, a place that wasn't just bigger but quieter. Safer, healthier. When the kids joined him outside, still sleepy and wrapped in blankets, he knew the answer. "This is home," he said quietly. The kids nodded without hesitation. They already felt it too. The next few weeks moved quickly. There were papers to sign, arrangements to make, boxes to pack. He didn't have much to bring, but even small things took time. She helped whenever she could, showing up to explain forms, answer questions, or simply check in. She wasn't doing it because it was her job anymore. She didn't act like an officer or someone with authority. She acted like someone who cared. He noticed the way she talked to his kids, how she made them feel seen, how she asked about their interests, how she encouraged them. He noticed how she made the difficult parts of the process feel manageable. Sometimes he caught her watching him too quietly, thoughtfully, as if she was trying to understand how a person remained so gentle after living through so much. They didn't talk about it, but something warm grew between them each day. One evening, after they had finally settled into the new house, she came by with a small basket of things they might need, simple things like tools, extra bulbs, and a few kitchen items. You didn't have to bring all. This, he said with a shy smile. I wanted to, she replied. Stood at the doorway for a moment before she looked past. Him at the cozy home taking shape. It suits. You, she said. He nodded. Feels like we belong here. She hesitated, then took a small breath. Can I ask you something? Of course, he said, when you helped her that night. What made you stop? He shrugged lightly. She looked tired and lost. I knew that feeling. I didn't want her to stand there alone. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening. I think she chose well. They talked a little longer before she headed back to her car. When she turned to wave goodbye, something in her expression suggested this wasn't the end of their story. Months passed. Life settled into a calm rhythm. The kids went to a new school, one with more space and better support. They made friends. They grew more confident. He started working part-time in town, not because he had to, but because he liked staying active and meeting people. The town welcomed him easily. People respected him, not because of the property he now had, but because of who he was. She visited often. What began as help slowly turned into shared dinners, long conversations, and moments that felt simple but meaningful. He learned things about her, the pressures she carried, the loneliness hidden behind her strong posture, the moments when she questioned herself. In return, she learned who he truly was, a man who worked hard, cared deeply, and never asked for more than he needed. One evening, after a small celebration for the kids' achievements, she walked with him to the porch. You know, she said quietly, that knock on my door that night changed a lot more than I expected. He smiled gently. It changed mine too. She looked at him, warmth in her eyes. I'm glad I found you. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he stepped a little closer and let the moment speak for itself. The wind moved softly across the land. The stars shimmered. The house behind them glowed with the life they had built. For the first time in years, the future did not look frightening or uncertain. It looked open. It looked kind. It looked full of possibilities, ones none of them could have imagined. On that rainy night when a simple act of kindness quietly set everything in motion.